What is going on, guys? My name is John and welcome back to yet another video. As you probably know by now, Pokemon Legends Arceus is big on catching every Pokemon in the entire game, as you need to in order to complete the true ending to the story. That being said, I think it's time to take on a specific catching challenge that you've been asking about for a bit. Today we're going to find out how easily you can complete Professor Oak's challenge in Pokemon Legends Arceus. Now, if you have no idea what a Professor Oak challenge is, I've done one for basically every generation at this point, but essentially the objective is to catch and fully evolve every Pokemon that's available before each gym badge. Now, considering that there aren't any badges in the game, the roadblock that will separate the sections of this challenge are going to be the noble battles that you have to take on in each area, as well as a few more parts of the story that we'll cover as we get there. On top of that, we won't be using any glitches or exploits like the Babero Bridge glitch, but in general, there really aren't any tricks that we can mess with anyways. Before I get into the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. I usually give some metric that only 40% of the viewers are actually subscribed, but I just found out that you're literally the only person who hasn't, so do with that information as you will. Alright, let's get into the challenge. So unlike every other Professor Oak challenge that I've done up until this point, we can catch every single Pokemon that's available in the entire game because there's only one version of this game, and considering that catching Pokemon is the core aspect of this title, there are going to be a lot of additions that will make this challenge a lot more convenient than the other mainline games. After showing the professor that a 10-year-old is smarter than him, we're able to meet the entire village and can start enrolling in the Galaxy Expedition team to truly begin the challenge. After getting the first mission request from Captain Silene, Professor Laventon gives us the option of choosing one of the starter Pokemon that we caught at the beginning of the game. Now, just like a lot of the later Pokemon games for this challenge, the starter you choose doesn't affect the difficulty or ability to catch more Pokemon before each badge. Because I've already chosen Cyndaquil in a challenge before, and I'd like to not acknowledge Oshawott as a Pokemon, we're going to go with Rowlet. Feel free to argue about that in the comments. Conveniently, the first actual mission in the game requires us to catch some Pokemon to prove our worthiness in helping start completing the Pokedex for the village. This intro tutorial is relatively short and it's just quickly catching Pokemon, so with this we can get Bidoof, Starly, and Shinx before heading back to the village. From here, Silene upgrades us to the No Star ranking, and we're once again able to head back into the Obsidian Fieldlands to actually start the first section of the game. Now, because the game doesn't allow you to access more areas until you beat the Noble for this area, everything for this first section of the challenge will only be caught in this area. That being said, there are actually quite a few Pokemon that aren't in the Fieldlands part of the Pokedex that you can get here, so there's a lot more available than you think there would be. Because the next part of the story requires us to get rank 1 in our Pokedex to continue to the next mission, we're free to explore the northern section of the map, as well as some other areas down by Lake Verity. Because I'm definitely too much of a baby to go to that area right now, let's just catch a bunch of Pokemon until we're able to progress. After running around for a bit, I was able to catch Wurmple, Ponyta, Weasel, Mime Jr., and Drifloon to bring the total to 9 Pokemon. Back in the village, we get upgraded to the first star ranking, which allows us to now cross the bridge to battle Mai, as well as access basically the rest of the Obsidian Fieldlands. Before we get to exploring, I was able to quickly catch Kricketot, a female Burmy from a tree, and Geodude. From here, we're forced to take down the Alpha Kricketune that is preventing us from setting up the camp, but thankfully we can catch this as well, but that's not mandatory as there are plenty of its pre-evolutions hanging around the map. Now, if you've seen me do this challenge before, you know that really any battle isn't difficult once you get through the first section of this challenge, and thankfully there are like 7 total battles in the story, so although my Pokemon are kind of getting bodied right now, this is going to be the only trouble we'll have for the rest of the game. With that taken care of, we can access a new spawn point, as well as instructions to go to the southern area of the map to talk to Pearl Team to see if we can help calm the noble Pokemon for this area. On the way there, we have access to literally everything, so let's do some more catching. On the way there, I was able to catch Paris, Pikachu, Psyduck, Baneri, Silcoon, a male and female Combee, Beautyfly, Cherubi, 2 Scyther, Cascoon, Dustox, and Zubat. At the Grand Tree Arena, we can meet up with Leon and have a quick battle before being told to go back to Laventon to come up with ideas on how to calm the Noble Cleaver. After learning about making bombs, believe it or not, we're basically free to take on the Noble Pokemon, which brings us to the first roadblock gate for this challenge. Now, although 25 Pokemon is actually a pretty massive amount of Pokemon to catch before evolving in the first section of this challenge, we really haven't even made a dent, so let's start making our way around the whole map and see how high we can get that number. If we head to the Heights camp again, Adamant will give us a Celestica Flute and let us tame Weirdeer as a ride Pokemon. This will help a ton during this challenge as we can cover a lot more ground as we make our way through each section. Now it's time for a small Poke Wrap. After running around the entire Fieldlands, I was able to catch Stantler, Munchlax, Abra, Shellos, Mr. Mime, Gastrodon, Kadabra, Luxio, Machop, Machoke, 8 Eevee, a male Burmy, Chimchar, Happiny, Pichu, Mothim, Magikarp, Bibarel, Staravia, Heracross, Rapidash, Snorlax, Drifblim, and Luxray. As I made my way around the map catching all these Pokemon, there were a ton of small things that happened that definitely had a big impact on certain parts of this challenge. At this point in the story, mass outbreaks are unlocked, which means that you can randomly encounter hordes of Pokemon nearly every time you enter each area of the game. For the most part, this will be basically useless, as the only useful ones for this challenge are the massive mass outbreaks that are locked to the post-game, but as you saw, I was able to get Kadabra, which made this a little bit more convenient. While I was in this area, I managed to defeat a Graveler and ended up dropping a black Agarite, which is required for an evolution for this section. This is realistically the only way we can access this item at the moment, and with only an 8% drop rate, this could have taken a lot longer. The other way you can get one is by collecting the NPC satchels that randomly spawn on the map, but we're going to need those for other items that we'll cover a bit later. After catching all these Pokemon, there was actually one more secret Pokemon that a lot of people forget about in this area. If you head to the coastline facing toward Ramanas Island, you can see a group of Qwilfish in the distance. Although these may look too far away to get, if you throw berries in the water, eventually they'll come close enough for you to either throw a ball at it or engage it in battle. During my catching spree, I was able to reach rank 2, which unlocks the ability of crafting feather balls. And I really don't think any other ball will reach that far, but after catching this many Pokemon, I was already at rank 4, so you really don't need much in order to make this possible. In addition to being rank 4, I was able to get access to Leaden Balls, as well as have a significantly easier time catching strong alpha Pokemon, so I was able to finally get Alakazam and Chansey because admittedly I forgot about that. With all those caught, I've basically grabbed everything for this section, but there is one more Pokemon we have to talk about. Now if you head back to Lake Verity, it's important to note that there are Pokemon available at the top of the lake, however getting up there is a different story. Now I'm pretty sure the developers intended that you were only supposed to go up there once you unlock Sneasler in the Coronet Highlands, but if you just use Weirdeer and just jump in the right spots, you can get up top without a problem. I know some people might consider this as an exploit to get more Pokemon, but I think realistically this isn't as game-breaking as you technically have access to the area, and it's not really clear if they wanted you to be up there this early in the game, but in my opinion this is perfectly fine for this challenge. After reaching the top of the mountain, I was able to catch a flying Togekiss, which brings the total to 52 Pokemon. Now it's time for my favorite part, the grinding section. As you can imagine, by having access to the entirety of the Fieldlands, we have a wide range of options for gaining a ton of experience to level up the very extensive list of Pokemon for this section. It's also important to note that a large majority of the Pokemon that we've caught so far have their evolutions in the wild, and although I may have missed a few, in reality it can be faster for some to just evolve the Pokemon than going out and catching it. Without a doubt, the premier option for gaining experience in this area, and arguably the entire game, is going to be the Alpha Blissey that's near the Grand Tree Arena. This Pokemon can give you an upwards of 10,000 experience points for each Pokemon in your party, as well as a drop for a large experience candy after the battle, so even Pokemon that don't participate can benefit from this. In reality, any Alpha Pokemon will do the job, but Blissey in general gives out a stupid amount of experience, so in my opinion this is the best option that we have. Although it is level 62, the Machoke that I caught earlier can knock it out in only 2 close combats, so grinding for this section won't be an issue at all. Because I don't have the ability to quickly fly over here yet, it does take a little bit of time to reach Blissey each time riding on Weirdeer. Thankfully, we can take advantage of another task as we're going along the way. As you can imagine, we're going to need a pretty hefty amount of evolution items to get through this area, and thankfully the colored ores will help out a lot with that. For majority of the southern and eastern sections of the map, each ore gives out a 1% chance of dropping a specific ore based on its color. Although this can be really tedious, there are a ton of ore locations, so on an average run to Blissey, I find around 1 or 2. On top of that, for some reason all of the ores near Blissey offer a 5% chance instead, and with the luck I was having with them, I would like to think it's even more than that. Another thing to note with the ores is that they're a fantastic way to boost friendship for your Pokemon. For this section, there's a pretty insane list of friendship evolutions, but thankfully if your Pokemon interacts with an object in the overworld, like breaking rocks or shaking trees, it will increase your Pokemon's happiness. In my experience, it takes about 20 interactions to max its friendship for evolution, and after all the stone farming, I was more than ready to evolve everything that needed to be. After I spent about 30 minutes grinding out all the Pokemon against Blissey, I started working on 2 very important Pokemon that don't evolve through level up, Stantler and Qwilfish. These are one of the few special evolutions in the game, as its evolution methods are based entirely around using a certain move. For Stantler, you have to use Psyshield Bash in Agile style 20 times, and for Qwilfish, you need to use Barb Barrage 20 times as a strong style move. Although this is tedious, the only thing that could actually be annoying for this is leveling up Stantler to learn the move, but I ended up catching the static Alpha Stantler, so I was ready to start from the get-go. Now it's time to evolve all our catches. After grinding everything up, I was able to evolve my catches to get Dartrix, Decidueye, Staraptor, Vaporeon, Jolteon, Flareon, Sylveon, Espeon, Umbreon, Leafeon through the Mossy Rock, Golbat, Crobat, Floatzel, Wormadam, Graveler, Weirdeer, Parasect, Raichu, Monferno, Infernape, Lopunny, Cherim, Golduck, Vespiquen, Cleaver, Gyarados, Overqwil, and Blissey. This brings the total to a whopping 80 Pokemon. So is that every Pokemon for this area? Well, Not exactly. So if you couldn't tell, I missed a couple of important evolutions for Graveler, Eevee, Scyther, and Machamp. Each of these 4 Pokemon have special evolutions that require a special item, and unfortunately the only way to get them is through farming satchels and collecting merit points. Now if you play the game right now, your game is probably loaded with them, and once you pick up each one, the game will basically instantly respawn a new set of them once you reload into the area. Unfortunately, at this point in the game, that isn't the case. For some reason, the developers coded it so as you progress to each area, satchels will be more likely to spawn, and this is set in an in-game clock. This means that you basically just have to sit and wait in the overworld for time to pass before checking for another one to appear. And how long is that time in this section? 3 hours. Yeah. 3. I will say that sometimes they would just randomly appear once every hour, but for the most part it would take nearly 3 hours just for one single satchel to appear. Now you may be asking, why don't I just wait for space-time distortions to appear as they have all of the same items? And the issue with that is that those aren't unlocked until you access the next area, so this is literally the only option available for the entirety of this section. In order to get the evolution items to finish this section, I need to collect 4,000 merit points, and when each satchel gives you between 50 to 100 points, you can do the math on how many we're going to need. So although this obviously takes a ridiculous amount of time, there is one more option that we can look into. Online. Now normally I don't do online stuff for this type of challenge, but just out of complete curiosity, I bought an online membership for this save file and immediately 4 player satchels dropped on the map. This obviously helped me get started, but after that, basically no other actual player satchels drop for the remainder of this section. This makes me believe that the coding for how the satchels drop is bugged for this part of the game, but I basically paid $10 to save 12 hours of sitting around. The following days for this challenge, I just set an alarm on my phone every 3 hours and sat in the fieldlands until I collected enough satchels to redeem the items I needed. It's kind of lame that they seem to be a lot more common right after this section, and as you can imagine, my game time is now through the roof, so I'll try to give a more accurate game time total for the challenge at the end of this video. With the 4 evolution items in hand, I was able to get Golem, Machamp, Glaceon, and Scizor. This brings the total to 84 Pokemon, and all the Pokemon available before the first Noble battle. Insane. Alright, now that we have a third of the entire Pokedex, let's take on the Noble. As you can imagine, these battles won't be too much of an issue, considering that we cover literally any typing in the game at this point. In general, these fights really aren't that hard once you learn all of their attacks, but in addition, the team is slightly higher level than Cleaver, so naturally, yeah. After curing Cleaver with the final bomb, we can return back to the Jubilife village and talk to Commander Kamado about our next mission in our list. Because we gained so many star rankings from catching such a large chunk of the dex, we're more than free to head to the Crimson Mirelands to jump into the next section of this challenge. As you know, this section of the game is relatively short, but despite that, there are still many Pokemon available for us to catch. At the camp, we can talk to Akari and Laventon, and they'll mention that space-time distortions can now appear after a certain amount of time while walking in the area. As you know, there are quite a few Pokemon that are exclusive to these, so it's important to not forget about them before finishing each area. After completing the events in the Silesian Ruins and meeting Calba and retrieving the Slab of Unknown text, we're pretty much free to roam about the map and catch whatever is new. Another new addition to this area is that Unknown will now spawn in the overworld for the Dex quest. Although there are locations that Unknown can spawn in the Fieldlands, they don't appear until you complete this event, and I double-checked earlier in the challenge and didn't see any one of them in the locations that were accessible. Before I started catching more Pokemon, I grabbed a bunch of Hardy Grain to complete the quest for Tau Hua, so I could purchase Great Balls to make catching harder Pokemon like Static Alphas significantly easier. Now let's grab a ton of Pokemon as we head to the next section. On the way there, I was able to catch Badoo, Carnivine, Tangela, Tangrowth, Krogunk, and Hippopotas to bring the total to 90 Pokemon. At the second camp, we can have a quick battle against Ursaluna before being able to unlock it as our next ride Pokemon. Unfortunately, we'll have to use this again for some important evolution items, unless we'd like to entertain the satchels. Yeah, I'm good. At the end of the cutscene, I spotted a little Unknown hiding in the tree, so I grabbed that to start a massive catching spree. Because nothing is blocked off in this area, we're free to grab literally every Pokemon. With this, I was able to get Petalil, Ghastly, Rhyhorn, Sudowoodo, Roselia, Roserade, Lickitung, Licky, a female and male Ralts, Wishcash, Barboach, Yanma, Yanmega, Turtwig, Murkrow, Honchkrow, Togetic, Onix, Pachirisu, Stunky, Skuntank, Hippowdon, Teddiursa, Ursaring, Goomy, Sliggoo, Bonsly, Haunter, Togepi, Toxicroak, and Grotle. This gives us a new total of 122 Pokemon. Because I spent so much time without leaving the area, a space-time dimension actually appeared, so I was able to catch Porygon and Porygon 2 as well. Now, you might be quick to point out that I also need Cyndaquil, but a small fact about the dimensions is that the starters don't actually appear in them until you beat the main storyline. This is why I said at the beginning of the video it didn't matter who you chose, because you can only catch the other 2 in the postgame. I'll still need to catch Porygon Z or grab a Dubious Disc, but we'll focus more on that in a second. Now it's time for everyone's favorite mechanic in the game: digging. In specific locations on the map, we can ride on Ursaluna and grab a small list of items, ranging from chunks of iron for crafting to rare evolution items that we'll need to finish this section. The two targets that we're looking for are the Sunstone and the Peep Block, and thankfully we only need one of each for the entirety of the challenge. That being said, there are definitely a few complications. Although I found the Sunstone pretty quickly, it took me nearly an hour and a half to find one Peep Block. Immediately after finding one, the second spot I checked gave me, you guessed it, another Peep Block. You may be wondering, John, why are you hunting for more items when you already have the two that you need? This is why. I drowned. I think I'm literally the only person who's ever drowned in the Mirelands bogs, considering I didn't even know that that was possible. But because I was holding the Sunstone that I found, the game was very kind and decided to take that away from me and force me to get another. On the upside of losing this item, this probably wouldn't have happened. Although I already have this Pokemon from the Fieldland section, I'll still probably evolve this later and use it on the team for fun. After reclaiming the Sunstone, we basically grabbed all that we need for this area, but in order to truly grab everything, we're going to actually head back to the first area of the game. Because space-time distortions are available everywhere now, we can wait for one to appear in the Fieldlands to catch Sneasel. Because this area is a great place to farm evolution items, I waited for a few more to spawn, which conveniently helped me obtain Steelix and Weavile, which are both evolutions that I would have otherwise needed to use merit points on. After trying for a couple hours collecting all the evolution items I needed, I decided to just pick up the remaining satchels and just buy the final item. I did end up having to wait a little bit to get enough points, but eventually I was able to redeem for a dubious disc, which means that we're ready to get to grinding. Now, in comparison to the first section, there are obviously a lot less that we need to evolve here, and on top of that, a majority of them are either high enough level to instantly evolve, or really only need a few levels to get there. Thankfully, I still had some experience candies left over from earlier in the challenge, so I didn't need to grind a single Pokemon, which I'm extrememely grateful for. With this, I was able to evolve the catches to get Kirlia, Gardevoir, Lilligant, Gallade, Torterra, Rhydon, Rhyperior, Gengar, Porygon Z, Goodra, and Ursaluna. This brings the total to 138 Pokemon, which means that you can catch nearly 60% of the Pokedex before you beat the second boss in the game. That's crazy. After checking in with Kamado, I completely forgot that I had to do the mission where I found Arizu in the bog, but after that we're more than able to take on the next noble Pokemon. On the way to the Brava Arena, I actually found a shiny Murkrow, which is wild considering I also found this during the Catch 'em All video when the game dropped, and I've also never caught one in my main save file that I've perfected, which is arguably more insane considering I have like 250 shinies at this point. As most of you know, the Noble Lilligant battle is extremely easy to beat, and with Pokemon like Rhyperior on the team, this was an absolute cakewalk. With this taken care of, we can head back to the village and complete the questline with Kamado, and Silene gives us the go-ahead to take on the next section of the game. Our next stop is going to be the Cobalt Coastlines, which contains yet another extensive list of Pokemon that we'll need to grab in order to finish the challenge. After meeting up with Irida and being told to talk to Polina on the cliffside, we're free to explore any part of the mainland. Because I really wanted to open up the area as much as possible, I really focused on the story events, but I made sure to catch everything new that I saw along the way. On the way to the cliff, I caught Glameow, Spheal, Scorpy, Drapion, Aipom, and Vulpix. After talking with Polina, we can meet Iskin at Aipom Hill, which conveniently leads us into more catching. In order to make the food to summon Basculegion, we're gonna need to catch a Dusclops in Deadwood Haunt, so I quickly grab one of those to access more of the map. With the food made, we can summon Basculegion to become our new ride Pokemon, but this also begins the storyline leading to fighting the Noble on Fire Pit Island. After the misfortune to steal the legendary Growlithe, we're instructed to go there to get it back and eventually fight the Noble, so let's make our way around the map and catch everything that's available now. I was able to catch Purugly, Chatot, Duskull, Remoraid, Mantike, Mantine, Tentacool, Finneon, Luminion, Tentacruel, Basculin, Octillery, Celio, Piplup, Growlithe, Magnemite, and Magneton from a Distortion, Dusknoir, Magby, and Magmar. Believe it or not, that's literally everything for this area, so let's get into the grinding section. So as you can imagine, this shouldn't be too tough of a grind to get everything finished, but there are definitely a few complications that can happen if you're not prepared. The first thing is evolving Basculin. In order to evolve this, you need to take 294 points of recoil damage without ever feigning. This can be a little difficult in this area because of how close in level you are to the wild Pokemon, but I figured that fighting Pokemon that normally flee would be the best play, as if I miss hitting them in the back, they would be much less likely to attack me. Overall, this takes at most like 10 minutes to do, so as long as you're careful, it shouldn't be an issue. Next are the evolution items. A majority of the Pokemon for this section evolve from special items, and although for the most part I was prepared, I actually only had one Firestone to evolve between Growlithe and Ninetales. I figured that I could just go to Fire Pit Island and catch the static one, but apparently it despawns while we're there for the story, so I had to run around for a bit breaking ores until I found one. The final thing you might have a question for is, what about getting Magnezone? You can catch Magnezone in this area through a space-time distortion, and it only evolves in the Highlands, so how are you going to complete that? A lesser-known fact is that Magneton actually evolves with the Thunderstone as well, as they added in Gen 8 because they were tired of adding electrical locations in the games for 3 total Pokemon. Other than that, everything is pretty easy to evolve, so let's finish up this section. After grinding for a little bit, I was able to evolve the catches to get Walrein, Arcanine, Ambipom, Prinplup, Empoleon, Basculegion, Ninetales, Magmortar, and Magnezone. This brings a total to 174 Pokemon, and every Pokemon that's available before the 3rd Noble Battle. With the Noble Arcanine Cleanse, we're introduced to Ingo, who offers us a guide through the next section of the game, which leads us into entering the Coronet Highlands. Now at this point in the challenge, considering that we have over 70% of the entire Pokedex, the amount of new encounters we'll have to obtain is going to be pretty unimpressive. However, it is pretty common knowledge that this area is one of the shortest sections in the story, so it's kind of fitting. From here we can follow Ingo through the Wayward Cave and catch Bronzor and Bronzong, before battling Ingo and unlocking Sneasler to help traverse the steep cliffs. From here, the only task we have to do is scale the mountain and take on the Noble, so let's get back into catching. After making a full lap around the map, I was able to catch Chimecho, Hisuian Sneasel, Rotom, Chingling, Voltorb, Nosepass, Gligar, Gliscor, Gible, Gabite, Electabuzz, Elekid, Misdreavus, Cleffa, Clefairy, and Shieldon and Cranidos from the Space-Time Distortions. While I was catching all of these, I made sure to take down a few more Sneasel until one dropped another Razor Claw, as that was literally the only evolution stone that I wasn't getting from the distortions at this point. Aside from that, that's all there is to this section, so let's get to evolving. For once in the history of doing Professor Oak challenges, we don't need to grind up a single Pokemon, as every single Pokemon caught in this section is either already at level to evolve or requires an item. Because I spent so much time with the space-time distortions in the beginning, I was beyond ready to finish off everything. After applying all the evolution items and spamming the X and A button, I was able to get Electivire, Garchomp, Probopass, Electrode, Mismagius, Clefable, Sneasler, Rampardos, and Bastiodon. This brings a total of 201 Pokemon, but there are actually a couple more Pokemon we're missing. So if we head back to Laventon's office and we go to the message board, we can start the Seas Legend event. As you can guess, this will allow us the ability to catch Phione and Manaphy, and although we have had access to the Coastlands area for a bit, for some reason this event only unlocks once you complete it. In a way it makes sense because it's implied that you've explored everything in the area, but it's also strange that this isn't a post-game event like the other mythicals in the game. Regardless, after catching Weasel and adding Mantike and Overquotes to the party that I caught earlier, I was able to go into the cave and capture both of them. This brings a total to 203 Pokemon for this section, and every Pokemon available before the Highlands Noble Battle. After having a battle against Melly, I was able to take on the Noble Electrode, and although I'd like to think this is the hardest Noble fight in the entire game, I was able to finish this in only a few minutes before heading back to the village. After getting ranking approval, we can head to the final area of the game, the Alabaster Islands. Now, although this is the last new area of the game, there are actually a ton of Pokemon available after completing this area, but as you can imagine, this will contain a majority of the very few remaining Pokemon that we need to collect. At the camp, we can meet Adamant and Irida, and we're instructed with meeting Garrick at Avalug's Legacy to get approval for calming the final Noble. After catching Snorunt, Swinub, Piloswine, and Glalie on the way there, we can talk to him, and we're instructed with the short quest of chasing Sabi through the mountains to be able to use Braviary. After quickly running through the Snow Point Temple and fighting her at the top, we can finally unlock flying in the game, which not only allows us to grab the Eternal Ice for Garrick, but it also makes it significantly easier to grab the remaining Pokemon for the rest of this challenge. Once again, we have basically nothing else to do, so let's make our way around the map and catch everything for this section. After flying around the map for a while, I was able to get Bergmite, Zorua, Snover, Abomasnow, Riolu, Lucario, and Rufflet. Once again, all these Pokemon are high enough level to immediately evolve, so I was able to then get Frostlass, Mamoswine, Avalugg, Zoroark, and Braviary. With this, we've collected 219 Pokemon, but there is one more Pokemon that we have to grab. Because we now have access to every area in the game, we can finally take on the task of collecting Wisps. Although this is a really tedious task because of how many there are, I actually remembered a ton of locations and only had to reference a guide a little bit before I had all of them. In total, this took me a little over 50 minutes to do, and honestly, unless I got them as I went along in the story, I don't think I could have got them any faster than I did. Because of how convenient Braviary is, I figured it would have been a lot better just to get them all at once. After talking to Vesta with every Wisp collected, we can head back to the Crimson Mirelands and quickly catch Spiritomb, which covers all 220 Pokemon you can get for this section. Kinda. So normally in a Professor Oak's challenge, there's a section called the Pre-Elite Four, which covers all the Pokemon you can obtain from getting the last badge to beating the game. But considering there aren't any badges in this game and still Pokemon to catch, I guess we'll call this section Pre-Post Game? I don't know. The next Pokemon are available only after you defeat this noble, so you can call this section whatever you like. With the final noble taken down, we can start the storyline of getting banished from the village and working with Kogita to get the Lake Spirit items to craft the red chain. From here, we can climb to the top of Mount Coronet to take on Benny and Kamado and show them that we're actually friendly and want to stop the distortion in the sky. Upon reaching the platform, we can watch Dialga descend from the portal, and we're tasked with capturing it. Thankfully, because I unlocked Ultra Balls, which, let's be honest, are basically Master Balls in this game, I was able to catch in only one ball. Nice. With that taken care of, we're also tasked with catching Palkia, as it appears right after, which leads us into the storyline of discovering Origin Ore and having Laventon craft the Origin Ball, which is the actual Master Ball in this game. I know I'm skipping through a lot of the story, but at the end of the day, all these events take like 20 minutes to complete, so there really isn't much I can say, especially when there aren't any battles in the game aside from the embarrassingly easy Misfortune battles back in the cave. Back at the Spear Pillar, we can take on the Origin Palkia, and after quickly throwing 3,000 bombs at it, I was able to use the Origin Ball to catch it. This brings a total of 222 Pokemon, and every Pokemon available in the main story. But there's still quite a few more Pokemon that we need to grab. Now that we've finished the entire story, there are a lot of post-game Pokemon that are unlocked, and not trying to spoil it or anything, but nearly every single one is a legendary. As you probably know if you've played this, the entire post-game storyline basically revolves around following Volo and Kogita's instructions of collecting all the type plates that are hidden in the region, which result in you grabbing every remaining legendary Pokemon. Before we jump into that, if we head back to the professor's office, we can talk to him and receive the other 2 starter Pokemon, which saves a lot of time waiting for space-time distortions, as we can just add Oshawott and Cyndaquil to the total. So because the post game is literally just, hey, I think this Pokemon is a plate, go to this exact area and catch it, I'm not going to dwell too long in the specifics of how I caught each Pokemon so I don't bore you to death, especially when they're all stupid easy to catch, but after running around the map for 10 minutes, I was able to catch Mesprit, Azelf, Uxie, Heatran, Cresselia, and Regigigas. After defeating Kamado for the Fist Plate and receiving the Pixie Plate from Kogita, we've collected all but one typing, which leads us into following Volo to the Spear Pillar to find out that he's a scary man. After defeating his Cynthia team, we're tasked with taking down both Giratina forms. Now, in the Catch 'em All video I did for this game, I said this was a really tough battle, but after applying a bunch of grid items to my entire team, I absolutely bodied this thing. So when you put in perspective that I beat the hardest NPC in the game without having EVs on basically any members of the team when I first played, that's kinda impressive, right? No? Okay, anyways, after defeating him, we're given the final plate, which turns the Celestica Flute into the Azure Flute, which we can now use to summon the final battle, or it would be if we had everything. Let's fix that. If we head to the Cobalt Coastlines, we can quickly catch Giratina, which then begins the Kogita storyline for catching the final legendaries of the game. We're tasked with catching the roaming weather Pokemon, and after doing this a bunch of times, it's honestly a lot easier than I initially expected it was going to be. Which, to be honest, was the majority of the game now that I've dumped like 500 hours into it. Regardless, I was able to catch Landorus in the Fieldlands, Tornadus in the Icelands, and Thundurus in the Coastlands. With all 3 on my team, I wasn't able to unlock the final legendary until I got each of the 3 to research level 10. Because the starters Laventon gave me are the only Pokemon that need to evolve for the rest of the game, I multitasked and took care of that as well, which didn't take too much considering I carried them through basically the entire post-game story. After a whopping 10 minutes of doing both of these tasks, I was able to get Dewott, Samurott, Quilava, and Typhlosion. After showing Kogita the Pokedex entries, I was able to go to the Mirelands and catch a Namarus, which gives me a new total of 239 Pokemon. With every Pokemon in the dex captured, it's time to finish this challenge. At the top of the Spear Pillar, we can play the flute again and challenge the god of Pokemon, Arceus. Because I've grinded this battle so many times on my Twitch streams, I was able to defeat it with only taking 1 hit of damage, which isn't impressive at all, but I mean, I don't know what other commentary I can give here. This is the end of the game? That's the whole thing. After beating it, we're given a piece of it that's added to our party, which brings our total to 240 Pokemon in our Pokedex. Now, you might be very quick to point out that we're missing 2 Pokemon in the dex, which would be the final mythicals of the game. Because it's required you have a save file for copies of BDSP and Sword and Shield, these aren't necessary to complete the challenge, but considering that we're 2 Pokemon away from 100% in the dex, I figured to make Professor Laventon very happy. Alright, let's just head over to the board and... Wait, I only have the Darkrai then? But why wouldn't... Oh my god, I did it again. I don't have BDSP done on this save file. Well... What is going on, guys? After accepting the quest in the Fieldlands, we can talk to Medi and find the flower patch she mentions with the Gracidia in hand, and eventually Shaman will appear. After completing the dialogue, we're free to battle and catch it. Finally, if we head back to the Highlands at nighttime, we can go near the second camp to encounter Darkrai. This one is a little bit harder to get because you need to hit it from behind, but overall these 2 events took like 5 minutes to complete. With Darkrai in the dex, we've caught all 242 Pokemon in the game, and completed Professor Oak's challenge for Pokemon Legends Arceus. But how did I do? So let's review. After catching Darkrai, I finished the game with a total time of 205 hours and 50 minutes. Now you're probably thinking, what did you do? And the honest answer is that I accidentally left my Switch on for a couple days while I was waiting for the satchels to spawn. There were a few days where I was out of town and I didn't have access to my Switch, so I just kind of left it on. After checking all the recording times, it came out to about 40 hours of game time, but honestly I think it was even less than that, considering that some of these recordings were just me leaving the recording going as I waited for satchels to appear by accident. Overall, as you can imagine, this is a very easy Professor Oak challenge to do, and aside from the satchel waiting, I'd highly recommend for you to try it out and see if you can get a better time. Which you will. Who knows? If they make a DLC with more Pokemon, I might try it again. Other than that, that's gonna do it for today's video. If you liked the video, leave a like and consider subscribing, as I have a decent list of videos coming out, with another neat one coming next week. If you want to see me take on challenges like this live, I stream on Twitch pretty frequently, and you can find a link for that as well as my Twitter in the description. Other than that, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.